And we're back, Shacknews live at E3. We're here with Louis from Free Jam, here to talk about Robocraft Infinity.
Nice to meet you guys.
Now, Robocraft is already a thing.
Yes, it is.
So just to establish that up front, it's already on Steam, you can go play it right now.
Yep.
So tell us, what's different about Robocraft Infinity?
So, mainly it's the progression system. We've learned quite a bit over the last 2 years of our development on the PC version, and we've tried to take as many of those positive changes as we can, as well as any that we've wanted to make but possibly can't, over to the Xbox.
Right.
Those are the major changes on the progression system. Obviously, it's still early stages, but all coming out now.
And the pitch of Robocraft itself, both Robocraft and Infinity, is you build your ship, you build your robot, basically,
yeah.
right?
So Robocraft is a build, drive, and fight game. So we have hundreds of parts that you can build your robot completely from scratch. You can take it into test mode just to make sure it works. It's physics-based, so as long as it looks
so it might just
real,
fall over for all you know, yeah?
Well, it might not even move. But as long as you make something that kind of resembles a realistic shape, you can then take it into multiplayer battles, 5-on-5 arenas, and fight versus other players.
Cool. So have you had any like spectacular failures when you're designing a...
Oh yeah, I am not the best builder in our studio. Our artists are really brilliant. I'm the square box with guns on tops kind of guy. But yeah, I mean, generally you can make something that works fairly easily.
So what necessitated, like when you were thinking, we want to blow this out, we want to make it for Xbox One and Windows 10, why was progression the logical place to start? What was that the thing that you wanted to do?
Well, it's mainly that on the PC version, the kind of progression that you need is really, so you drop crates at the end of each game you win, and those crates drop parts. The parts are what you use to build your robots, but it obviously slows down progression because you're waiting for all those parts to drop out of the crate.
Sure, yeah.
So part of Infinity is that when you get that item out of the crate, you have an infinite amount of that cube. That means that for creativity, you are really not limited to how many parts do I currently own. You just have an infinite amount of them, and you can really go wild.
Mm-hmm. And it's free to play on Steam. Is it going to be free to play on?
It is not going to be free to play on Xbox.
That's why you can have like infinite parts. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, that's one of the other reasons that we've changed it is, as it's a pay upfront model, we want to make sure that we give players those extra benefits they would have received if they'd had to pay the free to play version.
Was that like a response to community feedback? Were you watching how people responded, and are there people who you think just would prefer the free to play version?
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, free to play has its own benefits. Our main problem with free to play, and not necessarily that it's a bad thing, is that to encourage people to pay, you have to kind of limit some elements of the game.
Right,
and obviously in a game which relies heavily on UGC and tries to encourage people to have really good creative robots, we want to try and allow them as much freedom as possible.
Right.
And free to play models just don't allow it as well as pay up front.
And you're not like taking away the free to play option or anything. If people prefer that, they can just go ahead.
It's still free to play on Steam, and it will always be free to play on Steam.
Yeah.
It'll just be pay up front on Xbox and Windows 10.
So what else has changed aside from progression, the free to play hooks and things like that?
So obviously a bunch of the balancing will change, the way that we move parts. Because of the fact that Infinity allows for an infinite amount of cubes, we'll also be encouraging something called we have this in the free to play version, but it'll be much more effective in the pay up front version, called the CRF.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our community robot factory. Players who are not necessarily the best builders are free to buy robots off the community factory that other players have built, and we have millions on there. So
and does it just give you the correct parts for it, or?
Well, it puts the robot into your garage bay.
Oh, okay.
So you have a fully pre-built robot. You have to pay some in-game currency that you earn from playing the game normally, but that's the incentive for the builder. But otherwise, you have a fully functioning robot put straight into your account that you can then just take straight into multiplayer battles.
Cool. And multiplayer battles, we've said build battle, like we've talked a lot about the build part. Let's talk a little bit about the battle part.
Sure.
How do you deal with things like balance when it comes to a build your own combat game?
Yeah, well, for sure it's not the easiest. I mean, we have so many combinations, especially just physics-wise. The variety of movement parts and weapons in conjunction is definitely a challenge. We rely heavily on community feedback. We do our best and to internally test it. We have a good QA team, but there is inevitably going to be problems when we go live, and we have a really good community for feedback, and obviously we try and respond as quick as possible.
Has there been, you mentioned the community garage where people can just buy robots. Has there been one that like would would be dominant if somebody if people could just buy it. It's like, oh, that thing is too powerful. There's something going on there.
I mean,
you know?
over time, we've got some amazing builders, and they definitely know how to find those really top robots. So there have definitely been reactions that we've had to robots that we don't expect to be as powerful. Obviously, players prove are very powerful. But generally, it's a good mixture. We're trying to have a rock, paper, scissors kind of balance.
Sure.
So usually there's something that will counter it.
So what makes a good build? If somebody is starting out and you want to like teach them the basics of building a good combat robot, like what in Robocraft and Robocraft Infinity, like what even qualifies as like that's a good solid build?
So it's physics based. So one of the first things you've got to remember is to make sure that your robot just functions normally. I mean, we have a test mode for that.
Like,
but,
you need to make sure it can move out of the way of
yeah,
things.
exactly. I mean,
basically.
you just got to think of stable bases. You know, you have great examples in real life of things like cars and airplanes with the way that they work. You obviously want to, as it's a cube-based building system, parts of your robots will fall off as you fight. So you also want to make sure that when you lose parts of your robot, it continues to stay as stable as possible. If you lose a leg and suddenly the whole robot cannot move anymore, you're in for some bad times.
So are bipedal humanoid robots like not a great
That's
idea?
True, but maybe one robot with one gun on top is not going to get you very far.
Yeah, obviously. Is there like a strategic advantage of like aerial versus ground-based versus
Yeah, of
that
course.
sort of thing?
So we've got two different kinds of game modes, and the game mode, to a degree, will determine what kind of robot is good. Aerial robots are always going to be good. We're trying to make sure that they're balanced between air and ground. But in games like Team Deathmatch, where the whole aim of the game is just to kill each other, get to 25 kills, win on your 5v5 teams, aerial bots do play a good role. In the fact that they've got the height advantage, they can see what they're looking at. They can do damage from afar and just try and keep themselves alive as long as possible. In our other game mode, which is Battle Arena, which is a base capture game mode, you want tankier ground robots, because obviously being in the sky you rely on being fast and maneuverable, but you can't do that if you have to sit on top of a point. So being ground tanky usually is most effective in that game mode.
So are there other game modes that you guys have planned for either Infinity or for even going back to the original?
So we have custom game modes, and custom game mode we have added some previous existing game modes that we introduced that, whilst they were fun, maybe not as popular with the community, but people still wanted to play them. You can play that in custom games, as well as we obviously have ideas to introduce more. We also have something called Brawl, which is it's a fun game mode that we tweak what you're allowed to use in that game mode every week. So it's basically like a new game mode every time.
And what are the environments like? I've seen desert-like environments. Now we're looking at a very snowy environment. How does that affect gameplay, and what kind of variety do you go for?
So it's a sci-fi based game. So all of these environments are based on planets. So we've got Mars, we've got Venus, and we've got Earth-like planets. You do have some differences in the planets, the main one being some of the ice planets. So obviously you've got ice over some of the ice planets. So trying to use wheels on ice, slip a little bit.
Especially since it's physics-based, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Obviously we also have things like in the mountainous ones on the Mars planets, you can't climb up the side of mountains unless you use specific parts. So obviously you'll lock yourself into certain pathways that we've created unless you use some of these other parts. But otherwise, generally, we try and keep them as fair for every class as possible.
Yeah. You don't want a particular map to favor one kind of.
Well, as the maps come up randomly, it would really suck. If you chose that wheeled vehicle on the ice planet, it probably wouldn't work out so well.
It sounds like more than most games, this sort of has to be very responsive to the community. Because you've got a large dedicated group of creators, and the creators are influencing how games even go. So tell us a little bit about the kind of feedback that the community tends to offer, and how you look at that, how you respond to it.
Well, we obviously have quite a variety in our community. We've got some really hardcore players who want to make sure that the game is always challenging, and their feedback mainly goes towards the competitive side. So what guns they think are strong, what combinations of weapons and movement type they think need to be changed. But obviously their intention is to make the game hard. Whilst the casual players who want to go in and build a dinosaur with a top hat and just take that into a multiplayer game and just have some fun, maybe don't want the same kind of hardcore controls.
Yeah.
So obviously you have to balance it quite well. We have a community Discord where we talk face-to-face, through chat with the players. We try and take feedback from all sides of the community. We've got a great YouTube and Twitch community who like to give feedback as well. We get a lot of videos sent in to us by the creators. So yeah, we try and have a mixed balance, but obviously can't always favor everyone.
Yeah. So how you mentioned like the players who want to make a T-Rex with a hot top hat, which I want to see. But do you have like different lobby options for them if you're like, hey, I wanna screw around and have fun? Is
So
there like a funnel for that?
Yeah, so custom games is part of the reason we added it, really.
Yeah.
Obviously, those really competitive players aren't necessarily a fan of 3 people in their team coming in with a dinosaur or a chicken robot. They feel like they're probably disadvantaged. So custom games is where we encourage them to do that. But we also have a ranked and unranked system. So
Sure.
you can go into ranked game modes, that's where we expect you to try and do your best, and your rank obviously reflects how well you do. And then there's the non-ranked game mode where it's just really for some casual fun.
And going forward, you have sort of 2 versions of the game starting soon. As you issue updates to one, will it always necessarily be an update to the other? Will you be sort of weighing them separately? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm sure that we will have updates that come out on the PC that will absolutely come out on the Xbox. They don't always necessarily mesh. Obviously, some things that work really well on keyboard and mouse or for the PC community on free-to-play might not work as well on a paid-upfront console.
Yeah.
But luckily, we do have quite a quick release cadence. We tend to do updates once every 2 weeks, so we usually have quite a lot of content coming out. And with the general release cycle on an Xbox, that tends to mean that every release should have quite a lot of content.
Were you surprised at all by anything when you were taking it from keyboard and mouse setup to the controller setup? Was anything different that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, mainly things like the movement. It's quite fluid, and camera controls are quite easy to do with mouse and keyboard, but they are obviously much more of a challenge, and you just don't have that level of fidelity with the gamepad. So it's definitely been a challenge. We're gonna nail it. It's not like it's something that we can't do, but it'll just take a bit of time.
Yeah, and do you have? You mentioned like you don't have that kind of fidelity. Sometimes I find that keyboard and mouse is much easier to like have pinpoint aiming precision, and that's why consoles tend to have more aim assist, things like that. Are those options that you're looking into?
Aim assist will definitely be on the console version. Obviously, the PC free-to-play environment will not share an environment with the console gamers.
Yeah.
We don't want to disadvantage them as much as possible, and obviously our focus is in supporting controllers on the Xbox and not mouse and keyboard.
But things like new modes, new maps, things like that would probably be shared.
Those are the kind of things that are easier to share,
Yeah.
It's mostly things like the new movement types that might take a little bit more work to port across to the console version.
And since it's all block-based building, how do you introduce new parts? Like, what kind of parts are there to introduce, basically?
So obviously, we try to introduce new movement types and weapon types. That kind of what keeps the game interesting. It also allows for new creative builds. As it's block-based, we tend to have connection points on each of the new weapons or movement types, so that you can directly connect a chassis cube to that block, which connects it to the rest of your robot. So the actual adding it to your robot is not so difficult. It's mainly the balancing of that new movement part or that new weapons part with the general physics of the game that tends to be the biggest challenge for us.
So give us an overview of, like, you've mentioned different movement parts. Give us an overview of like what kind of movement part variety there is. So we've got wheels, obviously, tank tracks, we've got spider legs or insect legs, and they're great for climbing up the side of cliffs. Other things can't do that. We have hover blades, we have skis, we have helicopter rotors, we've got propellers, we've got aerofoils, obviously wings. I mean, quite a large variety, really. If someone tried to make, has anyone made like a thing that can just, like an all-terrain vehicle, like a literal all-terrain vehicle that can go anywhere?
Well,
does that even work?
Yeah, well, we have thrusters in the game. Obviously, the initial intention on release was to have them be something that adds force to your robot. It just basically makes you go faster. But we have so many good builders. They created robots that have no movement parts, and they just use the thrusters to control themselves completely in all directions.
Oh, wow.
And, it's definitely
so they have like they'll thrust in a direction, then like counter thrust to like stop, basically.
It's really incredible. Some of the guys we have playing the game are much smarter than I am, so, and they're really able to create some fantastic robots.
Yeah, it's almost like building a rocket or something.
It is. Sometimes, I mean, with the amount of forces that they have to play with, they really are able to build some fantastic robots. But obviously, that's for those really competitive players.
Yeah,
it's still quite easy to build something that you can go in and have fun with.
Have there been players? Is there any segment of the community that isn't necessarily trying to build something that's competitive, but is trying to build something like Kerbal Space Program is a good example of a game that is like, I want to build a rocket that works like a rocket,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, we have a difference between what we call art bots and and what we call more hardcore robots.
Yeah.
So there are people who just try to recreate, as you can see on screen, a scorpion or a mech. So people will just try and create stuff they see in real life, like a rocket. Obviously, it's game physics and it's multiplayer, so we can't have it be exactly hardcore physics.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just be too difficult for people to create robots. But you certainly can create something that really represents the same as in real life.
So how do you tweak physics to make it more multiplayer friendly? That's an interesting
We just have,
point.
we tend to have forces that counter, so we'll have a force like gravity, but we might have a force that we code ourselves that will slightly reduce the effects of gravity, so something won't just plummet out of the sky if it loses all of its wings. It might fall, but at a reasonable pace.
Yeah.
So we tend to try and counterbalance some of the harsher forces, but generally it's fairly realistic.
Yeah, and you can. I think something that's interesting that you've mentioned a couple times is, you clip the wings, they'll fall. You take out a leg, they'll fall. Like, how much does that play into the meta of multiplayer strategies and figuring out how to make a build that won't be easily disabled?
Well, obviously those are really common tactics. Like you said, shoot off the movement part. They're not going anywhere. Shoot off their guns. They're not firing. We do have something called triforcing. It's quite an advanced tactic, but it's basically that because it's a cube-based system, you can kind of dictate the way in which the damage flows through your robot.
Mm-hmm.
So those really top builders will build robots where if they take a damage on a certain part, they expect a segment of that robot to fall off, and they'll control what segment falls off so that it affects their physics on their robot the least.
So what kind of counters are there for if you're in the defensive position and somebody's trying to snipe off your movement parts, your weapon parts, whatever? What can you do about it?
So there are a couple of things you can
Other
do.
than like pivoting.
So if you are, as originally we didn't have any concept of healing, we definitely noticed that players would end up as a square on the ground, and that was the end of their game. They weren't able to do anything. So we did add in auto healing a few years ago. If you're not taking damage for a period of 10 seconds, you'll start to heal your robot back up, and then once you're fully healed, you can carry on as normal. We also have something called modules. So modules are special high-cost parts that have special abilities. So one would be something like the invisibility module. It will make you invisible for a period of time. So if someone's aiming at you and you want to get away, just go invisible and you're able to kind of skip out there. We have something called EMP. Brings down this large lightning bolt which stuns everything around it, so it could be a good chance for you to give yourself a break. And we have things like blink that allow you to move from one place to another in an instant. So lots of counters to being focused down by players.
Yeah. So Robocraft, OG, the original Robocraft, is on Steam now. Do we know yet when we can play Infinity?
So it's currently available in an early beta at the stand currently, or an early demo, but it's pegged for release in Q1 of 2018.
Okay,
So
so
should be
sometime
seeing it
early
sometime
next year.
yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thank you very
It was
much.
good talking to you. And we'll be back with more from the Shacknews booth at E3.